Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to this Meet the Manager series. This is one of my favorite events. We speak with some of the superstars coming out of the VC Lab Accelerator, VC Lab alumni. And it's a lot of fun because we sort of go around the world and nothing's more interesting at this point, I would argue, than the kind of innovation that we're seeing out of Latin America. There's lots of reasons for that. And we're going to spend a lot of time today going through the process and understanding why Latin America is sort of like kind of becoming such a hotbed for innovation. But before we get started, if this is your first time joining us on one of these events, my name is Mike Supervici. I'm the head of acceleration here at Desal Group. Desal Group is a company whose entire purpose of existence is to help new and emerging managers thrive. And we do this in a number of different ways. We have an accelerator for venture capitalists called VC Lab. It's become more or less the way the vast majority of new managers and emerging managers start their funds. We've launched over 400 venture capital firms to date. We have a product called Desal Hub. It's become more or less the operating system for emerging managers. Over 500 active venture capital firms use it. We have an entire back office solution called Desal Partners. And we have a fund of funds. So the whole entire purpose of existence is to reduce the barriers to entry, make it slightly less daunting and challenging to launch a venture capital firm. And that's what we're here for. Today, what's going to happen is that we're going to host a panel, and we're going to talk a lot about, like the future of Latin America in this case. For you to maximize this experience for yourself, there's two things you can do. You can say hello in the chat, introduce yourself, say hello, do that kind of thing, put your LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. And then there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to go ahead and ask questions to the panel and all that kind of stuff, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. But before I do, let me just really quickly read a kind of a normal disclaimer that you see with these things. This is what you're seeing today. The content today is not directed at any investors or any potential investors and does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any securities. All right, so now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the panel. It'd be really great if everybody here could introduce themselves. Alex, maybe we can start with you, then Marcus, then Ali.
Yes, sure. I'm Alejandro Galvez. I'm managing partner of 99 Startups. We're a fund that invests in pre-seed and seed in Latin America, especially in fintech and SaaS. And previously, I had a lot of experience as an angel investor with over 60 investments and some unicorns. And yes, excited to be here.
Amazing. Marcus?
Yeah, my name is Markus Schreier, German in Latin America since 10 years. And we started with an accelerator and then last year launched the fund. We're very excited about the opportunities in Latin America, growing science-based impactful startups. And that is my passion. And that is why I'm here.
And last but not least, Ali?
Yeah, I've worked in tech for the last almost 20 years. Started with startups and led growth for a couple of different unicorns in Latin America. I've been an angel investor for more than a decade. And during the pandemic, ended up launching a syndicate that did pretty well. And I'm now kind of really focusing all my time on finding the best early stage companies and helping them grow.
Amazing, amazing. So really quick, and maybe Marcus, we can start with you on this one, and then Alex, and then Ali, what inspired you to start a venture capital firm, especially now?
The inspiration in reality came over time. I was running the accelerator, which is very specifically built for science-based startups with educational parts and a lot of international network in the biotech industry. We're completely focused on science-based startups. And one thing was very obvious: the acceleration, that means the speed to market, the speed to growth, was highly impacted by the lack of capital in Latin America for this type of startups. And we said, to support the startups, we raise a fund and find a way to invest in the best startups from the accelerator, and really help them to close the gap. And there is one thing which I will share, in the chat while everybody is speaking. There was just, I read it here. White House launches a $1 billion fund for Latin American entrepreneurs with Endeavor Miami. Yeah, so I will share that, but there is a lot of things happening in Latin America now, and I think we're in the right spot for that.
Alex, how about you? Why did you start a VC firm?
For me, I saw a lot of talent building great stuff and not enough capital. And also, I started to see the impact of the big startups and how you create these networks of entrepreneurs, that many of the new generation of entrepreneurs come from these big startups. So the more startups we have, the more new companies we're going to have. So I just saw a lot of talent and not really a lot of capital in the seed stage. Most of the capital is in Series A. So I decided to launch the fund so I can help more entrepreneurs, help them grow, and write bigger checks.
How about you, Ali? I mean, you've been an angel investor for a very long time, been very active in the space. Why start a VC firm?
I think there's a couple of big reasons that really drove me. One is I just think there's a huge opportunity, right? I led growth for a couple different unicorns in LATAM. The reason why, I, as somebody not from Latin America, those roles, because there's just some big gaps of knowledge that can be brought, and I thought I could help out a lot of startups with kind of passing on some of that knowledge. And then, the other thing is that I had a large network of people in the US who are excited about Latin America, but didn't really know where to start and where to actually start to help. And I felt like I could be the person that bridges that gap between the knowledge in Silicon Valley and what's happening on the ground in Latin America.
Yeah, totally. And like, speaking of that, Ali, what kind of opportunities or what areas of interest are you sort of most excited right now about in the region? I know you see so much stuff at this point. I mean, I saw some statistic where you see like almost half the stuff that's happening in the region. What are you the most kind of excited about right now?
So I think one of the biggest things is that over the last 20 years, the middle class has doubled and poverty's been cut in half. But when you look at most of the large companies in Latin America, they still kind of ignore that middle class. And so what really excites me is offering what we probably think of as really boring services to this huge base of the pyramid that exists. So anything from giving them the ability to buy a house or to get an apartment, helping them grow their small business, all these sorts of everyday regular things that we can just do very easily in the US. A lot of times it's very, very challenging for people in Latin America. It's extremely challenging for the middle class. Most of the people are not, maybe they're banked, but they're still vastly underbanked and don't really have access to credit or debt. And so anything that can kind of help provide that in a way that ends up increasing the velocity of money is really exciting to me.
How about you, Alex? I mean, you've also just seen so much stuff at this point.
Yeah, right now I'm really excited about the integration between different countries, because in Latin America we have very different countries with different currencies, especially in the part of real-time payments. I think cash is still king in Latin America, but probably this is gonna change over the next 5 to 7 years. And we're seeing a lot of real-time payments really interesting, like Pix in Brazil, Spay in Mexico, and really the integration of these real-time payments and the integration between countries. I think there's gonna be huge opportunity in building the infrastructure for payments in the countries.
I mean, I can't agree more, and then the really interesting thing, at least from my vantage point here, Alex, and I'd love to get your views on this too, is it's also that when entrepreneurs are building these companies and these startups, they're sort of skipping a lot of like the legacy stuff. For example, in developed ecosystems like the United States, it's kind of hard for them to sort of skip the banking layer, whereas, in LATAM, you almost have no choice, right? But to sort of kind of circumvent some of that and like really get to market? I mean, I don't know. I'd love to get your views on how you see this progressing.
Yeah, sure. And also we're looking at the government, like in Brazil, PIX, like building really great infrastructure and really great stuff. Or like in Peru, Nequi, it's not from the government, it's from a private company. But like you see, uh, also the government and the private markets building these new infrastructures. In the US, like checks, for example, they work so well that there's no need to change. In Latin America, we don't have this infrastructure, so we can, as you say, skip this and build like the new like layer, like skipping the old stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. Marcus, what are you excited about?
Yeah. What excited me from the beginning was really the immense talent in science, which I had not expected at all in Latin America, which is second to none, which is on the same level as you find it in MIT or Harvard or anywhere. But the big difference is they're inspired by their daily environment. I mean, they're really trying to solve problems which are close to their heart, close to their day-to-day. And that is something I've seen when I lived in Boston, very different. They were looking 20 years out, 30 years out with I call it science fiction instead of science. Yeah? And we see more and more of that. And that combined with a step-by-step, slowly let's say, more open mind and also open eyes from international corporates that, wow, there's something happening in Latin America where we can build on and give those young entrepreneurs a chance to really impact human health and planetary health directly, but on a global basis. That is amazing, and that really, I find, something which will change the position of Latin America completely, because we have one startup, they have 120 employees in Latin America, and they have only 5 in the US, but they're a US company. So it means they're recognized as a company, but they're leveraging the talent of Latin America, and with that, of course, impacting also on the social basis. So that is really what I see as the big opportunity, the talent combined with the opportunity which that the international companies start to be open to look at Latin America as an opportunity for innovation, for science-based innovation.
That's fascinating, because when you sort of think about like LATAM, obviously, like you see some of these companies that have like gone global, and a lot of times they do tend to be more like, say like fintech or something like in that space, Ramp or whatever. Pick your example. I mean, even the founders of Brex, right? They're from LATAM, like a lot. You don't really automatically think about like the next like science-based sort of like innovation as well, just because I guess in technology we don't have as much exposure to that. That's super interesting. Any sort of comments on that? And when do you think we'll get the next like unicorn from science coming out?
It's a very good question. I think we have had 1 or 2 unicorns. We also had already not startups with Latin American founders, which were had big exits in the United States, but they were still all founded and more or less focused on the United States. Some of those people are now in Latin America to support the development of the next unicorn. So I expect that in the next 5 years, we will see several in this space coming out and really being unicorns, being really impactful on a global basis. Now we have one startup which just started a big contract in Europe, impacting significantly diagnostics of pregnant women. So, and it's a technology which came from Latin America, and they're in big contracts now. So I think there is a lot of things happening when we will see in the next 5 years significant announcements. Hopefully, they will also be related then to Latin America.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Ali, is there, from your experience, is there any sort of like innovation trends that you think that the LATAM market like particularly excels in over, say, other regions? And I know and I ask you this first just because I know you have a lot of exposure across a lot of emerging markets in general as an angel and whatever. Is there something about like LATAM entrepreneurs or the market in particular where you see these trends sort of it's better suited for them?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what happened in the US, where you have a success case like PayPal, and then you end up with the PayPal mafia. I think we kind of started to see that in, Colombia with like the Rappi Mafia. And what I expect will be happening is all these other countries that have, especially the ones that are tied to other big, large industries like mining or forestry or agriculture, will start to really innovate around those areas as well. And so what I'm expecting is we're going to see big unicorns pop up in unique spaces across the continent, and then the alumni from that will kind of end up dominating specific sectors based on that.
Yeah, I kind of see this as well. It's really super interesting to just where that's going. I don't know, Alex, what do you think? Is there any other areas besides obviously kind of like the ones we just talked about? Anything that comes to mind?
Not particularly. As Ali was saying, I think we start seeing like a lot of more mature entrepreneurs, and also like the best practices. Like 20 years ago, the best practices of Silicon Valley were exclusive to Silicon Valley, but now you have all this access to information and all this public knowledge, so it's easier to learn how to build great products and build a startup. I think we're starting to see this in Latin America and all over the world, like this entrepreneurship spirit to really build great stuff. It's growing a lot. And also the advantage in Latin America is that with really you don't need a lot of money to go really far away. Like even with 200K, 300K, you can build like a really amazing product and an MVP and start charging customers.
It's amazing, right? Just how much traction people can get in LATAM off of like a pre-seed kind of round, right? It's fascinating. Like, it's really, really cool. And I mean, in Marcus, you out of all people, you probably see this the most because these like life science companies typically need enormous amount of R&D, and you're like getting them to market without, through your accelerator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a big, let's say, how do you call that, capital arbitrage, which we have. And that means the capital you need to move forward is significantly less, and that's why a pre-seed fund can have a significant impact on the success of the startups when they get this, relatively compared to US market, little money. So it's definitely, something we have seen as a big advantage for the startups, which brings this cost arbitrage, but at a certain point in time, when they go global, it's also valuation arbitrage, which they have as an advantage, also for the investors, of course, but it's interesting.
Definitely super interesting. Everyone, if you join a little bit late, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Add your questions into the Q&A. We're doing this for you. I can go with this group all day. These are some of my favorite people in the world. We spend a lot of time together. But we do want to do this for you, right? So if you have questions for the panel, hit the Q&A button, add your questions in there, upvote them. Happy to go ahead and send them over to that. Okay, so we obviously have been speaking a lot about like the potential here, a lot of opportunity and things like this. I don't know, Alex, maybe we can start with you. What would you say are some of the key challenges for venture capitalists in Latin America right now?
I think there are two main challenges. On the LP side, we don't have a lot of institutional LPs, and it is still a new asset class. So we have some big family offices investing and some institutional LPs, but we still need a lot more of institutional capital and a lot more capital into new funds. That's always challenging. And on the other side, we still need more liquidity, more exit, especially in places like Mexico, Colombia, or other places. Brazil is farther along, and in Brazil you have a lot of liquidity in the market and even more institutional LPs. But like for the rest of Latin America, we have great companies with that sell a lot of with really good numbers, but we haven't seen that many exits yet. And I think also we need more startups, more bigger startups, so that they can buy smaller startups as well. But with what has grown the ecosystem over the past 5-6 years, I'm really sure that in the next 5-6 years we're gonna have a lot more exits. but it's still challenging at this time. It's one of the challenges of the ecosystem in Latin America. I know we're gonna get there, and also that's why the opportunity is so huge right now, because if you don't see the exit, many don't want to invest, and if you don't have a lot of capital, then you have a better market for investing. So I think those two problems are improving, but we're still in the way of getting to a really mature ecosystem.
What are your thoughts, Ali?
I think similar to Alex's, right? Uh, there's a lot of great startups happening right now. There's a lot of great unicorns. We haven't had a ton of exits yet. And you know, I'm able or willing to make the bet that when you have this much money available, the guys at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley will figure out some way to make money off of it and help these companies to get more liquid. Um, and you know, it's just crazy how fast everything has grown. When you look at Latin America, 5 years ago there were 5 unicorns. Now there's 50, right? So with 50 unicorns all kind of waiting, and there's I think 200 unicorns. So you know we're having 250 companies that ideally will be going public in the next 10 years. So what do you think about investing in pre-seed? I'm making the bet that there's 250 people ahead of me that kind of have to figure this out, and that there's a lot of money to be made, and that I'm willing to make a bet that people are greedy and will figure out some way to make money off of all these great startups. But it's sometimes hard to get other people to believe in that, which I find surprising because I feel like betting on the greed of investment bankers is a pretty good bet for most people.
You know, the other interesting part of that too is like it kind of reminds me of India. You know, India was just like this maybe about a decade ago. They had like 5 unicorns for the whole country or 10, and now there's like within like 5 to 10 years, there's hundreds of unicorns, right? It just kind of blew up like that. You know, it's kind of interesting point. And then Sequoia went in, and a whole bunch of other funds went in, kind of almost late in a way. You know, Marcus, what do you think are some of the big challenges that you see?
You know, I think I echo most of the points. I want to address probably one additional point which I see and which I think is a way to the future success, and that is the cultural aspect. You know, Latin American investors or Latin Americans in general are very risk adverse. Yeah, even more than the Europeans. Europeans are risk averse, but Latin Americans are in general a lot more risk averse. But there comes the other part. They're followers. They're followers. They're investing with friends, etc. So I think if we see those trends happening, which Alejandro and Ali were mentioning, that means that we start to see the first exits, or that we see more exits. That we see, you know, an initiative as I shared it, that the White House launches this $1 billion fund, and significant investors like SOS Ventures, etc., are supporting this to invest in Latin America, then I think we will see that. But these are the challenges today. Today, it's still very hard for startups as well as for funds to get access to capital. But we see those positive trends. And when I look back, since, you know, when I started, there was nobody even talking about biotech, and that is 7 years ago. And now, you know, initiatives all across Latin America and biotech. So it will happen in the next, as Alice said, in the next 3 to 5 years, we will see a significant movement there. But the challenges are still realistic or still real, but the indicators are going in the right direction.
Francisco has a question, and maybe we can start with you, Alex, and then Ali as well. I love your thoughts on this. So his counterpoint is that, you know, there has been, at least from his point of view, a lot of fintechs that have been started in Latin America. And he's using the word flooded, like there's a lot. You know, do you still think that there's opportunity for angel investing in startups that target sort of like the unbanked in LATAM, which was kind of a pretty big growing theme, at least a few years ago?
Yes, sure. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but also targeting the unbanked, it's really difficult. Like, sounds really sexy, but there's a reason why the banks are not serving those clients. It's because it's really difficult to serve them in a profitable way. there's a lot of opportunity, and you see, like always, a lot of startups building it, a lot of failing, but the ones that do it really well, they have great numbers, are growing really fast, really profitable. Uh, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there's still going to be a lot of opportunity, especially because, for example, in the credit side, there's not a lot of credit in Latin America. In the US, it's really common and it's really cheap, but in Latin America, you don't have a lot of credit. So if you build a right model and do the underwriting well, you have a lot of opportunity to build really profitable companies that are being not served by the banks. Uh, as always, it's really difficult, and many people think that lending money it's easy, and actually it's really easy to lend money. The difficult part is to get it back and to do it in a profitable way.
Yeah. Getting the money back is always the hardest part, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of opportunity on the fintech side and on the credit side, because uh, there's a lot of infrastructure that it hasn't been built yet.
Ollie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree with Alex. I think even though people may be banked now, they're still very underserved in terms of credit and debt. I think part of the problem or the reason why banks don't give that much credit debt is one, I think they're just more risk averse and not as familiar with how to do it. And then two, kind of going back to my earlier point, there's this huge number of people that are now in a more formalized economy that are now doing things that maybe 20 years ago their parents weren't. And it's much harder, I think, for people to assess that risk. But the interesting thing is that there actually is now a lot more data being collected. So there's a lot more ways to go and start trying to figure out how to assess that risk. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of startups that have access to information or data that maybe other people don't are able to then do more things, right? So if you have companies being able to sponsor kinds of credit cards or debt access and things of that nature.
Kind of an interesting question from Jim and Marcus. I'd love to get your views on this. You spoke about companies scaling outside of the LATAM ecosystem to markets like the United States and things like this. Jim's question is kind of the other way. Like, have you seen opportunities with companies onshoring like their products into sort of like this ecosystem and things like this for various reasons, for LATAM?
That's a very good question. And yes, first of all, we see it. Specifically in Brazil, we are currently evaluating even offering this help for startups in our field, in the biotech field, to get access to the Brazil market, which is a huge market, which is a big market, where it's really worthwhile. I think in other cases, you need to be very careful and selective because the market itself in the country, most of the country is very small. Yeah. So it needs to be a strategic reason why you, for example, when you go, of course, in specific agricultural fields and want to come to Chile, it makes a lot of sense because suddenly you have two seasons which you can serve, yeah, and you can do your validation in that other region. So I would say yes, there are the opportunities. But you need to consider that when you go into one market, does not mean, it means in one country, that you're automatically in Latin America. It's not like that. You need to conquer more or less every single country. And therefore, you need to be either very strategic or you select one of the big ones, like, for example, Brazil, where I've seen startups even doing that. A German startup who came to Brazil to offer their health tech solution in Brazil because in Germany, the systems were too complicated and they grew very fast in Brazil. So I would say the opportunities definitely exist, but you need to be either strategic and therefore accepting a small market, or you need to go into one of the bigger markets.
And what's like the benefit, or why is it just because of like regulation, Marcus? Is it that some of these ecosystems allow, for example, like, I don't know, like various things to go to market? Like here in the United States, we have this FDA thing that's pretty hardcore for companies. you know?
I can tell you Brazil, what it's called Anvisa is as hard as FDA. So there's no difference.
Okay.
It's even in some cases homologated. So if you get the Anvisa, you can go to the US directly, kind of. So, but in some areas, for example, if you want to do a certain validation of agricultural, let's say biopesticides, yeah, you can do the validation a lot easier in Latin American countries than in the US. The process is there, but it's easier. Or when you go into even into human trials, you can, or validation, let's say not trials, but validation means human medicine. You can do first step validation easier in Latin America. So absolutely, these opportunities exist, but again, it needs to be strategic because from a market perspective, you need to be very careful assuming LATAM is one market. It's not. Yeah, it's many markets. Yeah, and therefore, I think it needs to be in this element of strategically combining cost and the opportunity. It can be attractive for specific startups. And happy to talk about it if someone is specifically interested. When it comes into my field, that's where I can talk about. Cannot talk about fintech. That's we have other experts here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there's a kind of follow-up questions to this theme. So, we kind of always get this sort of, generalist versus specialist kind of strategy kind of question here. And there's of course one here about like doing this in LATAM. Obviously, Marcus, you're more specialized. Alex and Ali, much more generalist and broad in sort of their thinking about it. I'd love to, maybe dig in a little bit deeper on that though, because it's easy to get sort of opinionated about one or the other. Can you maybe sort of talk about how you think about this and why, as opposed to like the strategy that you're doing? For example, Ali, in your case, you're super early, so you almost by definition need to be more generalist. But I'd love to get your views on that team. So maybe Ali, we can start with you, Alex, and then we'll wrap with Marcus with the kind of specialized angle.
Yeah, I think part of it is also, how, I guess maybe not just thesis, but I see a lot of VCs that will have like very specific ideas of things they want to see in the world, and then go and like scour the planet for those specific things they want to build or invest in. I don't, unfortunately, right? Like the Latin American ecosystem is still kind of starting, and so we don't have, 1,000 options to do alternative protein, right? Like there's just, I don't think there are that many, right? And so if you are going to be a generalist, right? Like I think it's around more seeing the opportunities that are there and being able to support the ones that emerge. So that's kind of been more of my focus versus, just trying to build the things that I want to see happen. I want to, there's a lot of things I think that need to be built, and just trying to find the best people that are building things that I get excited by.
What's your view on this, Alex?
Yeah, I think in Latin America, markets are not that deep as in the United States, and it's really difficult to find that many opportunities in a particular area. I mean, there are opportunities and there are big industries, but I also think that you need to be a little bit more open to really finding those great teams building maybe in an area that you didn't think about it, because that's how you can find the contrarian opportunities. If you're looking only at one thing and are close to everything else, it's really difficult to find those contrarian bets. But if you're open to really exploring new stuff and things that nobody's investing in, then you can find great teams building stuff in areas that you didn't imagine. And I really just try to find amazing people with experience building amazing products and try to back them. I think both strategies can work, but it can be difficult in Latin America to be very narrow, because maybe you are not going to find enough opportunities to invest.
And Marcus, I mean, I know you're obviously drafting off of the Ganesha Lab with the accelerator, and talk to us a little bit of how you thought about like specializing a little bit more, with regards to your point of view, as at least within the science space,
Right, right. Yeah, when, we, first of all, we came from the point that the science as such is strong, but the translation into real business is lacking based on the not existing infrastructure and ecosystem. And this is at the end what we are building in the accelerator, what we are building up in the accelerator. So the specialization as such helps us to stay very much focused, being recognized the experts, and with that also attracting very talented entrepreneurs. I'll give you an example. We just onboarded into the accelerator a startup which is founded out of a technology from Chicago University. Yeah, so it's not that everything is found but it's a Latin American founder who then came back to Latin America to found this startup. So these startups have different options, but at the end, because we are specialized, because we are the experts, because we have surrounded ourselves with experts, they are coming to us, and that enables us to really focus not only on the money with the fund, but also really helping the entrepreneurial journey to bring them to success. And I think that is something which is critical, which, when you're living in Boston, you have it all, but when you're not living in Boston, when you're already living in Chicago, you might not have it, yeah? So, and that is where I see a specialization can help and drive success when you are offering, or when you're able to really guide this entrepreneurial journey, specifically with entrepreneurs who are coming from the science-based, and we don't have a big basis yet of entrepreneurs who have been going through the entire entrepreneurial circle in science. So that's why we focus on the specialization, where we believe in the specialization.
There's a question here from Adetayo. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, but are you all seeing any sort of opportunities with regards to secondaries? Are you seeing secondary opportunities in your portfolios as they sort of kind of scale? Just curious. And this is related to LATAM, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes, we're seeing opportunities in secondaries. It really, as always, it depends on the price. When it's a really good startup, you can get a good price. If it's good, but maybe not that good, or it's a high valuation, you need to sell at a really good discount. But we're starting to see a couple of funds that are starting to be specialized in secondaries. And yeah, I mean, and we've seen also a lot of opportunities of new funds leading the Series A or B and offering to buy secondaries. Maybe it's not that as common as in the US, but we see opportunities in there. I was gonna say another thing, but yeah, we see opportunities, especially in the good companies. But on the other side, if you are in one of the big winners, maybe you don't want to sell in the Series A or in the Series B. It's always good to give some money back to the investors, but also you gotta ride those winners. And if you think you're really into a big winner that's gonna be a unicorn, it's better to just keep the money and wait for more years. But yeah, we see opportunities in the secondaries, maybe not as much, and it depends a lot on the price, but there are opportunities to sell at a discounted price.
I mean, Ali, you're probably seeing a good amount too, right? I mean,
a lot of my stuff is still a bit earlier. So, most of my startups are more Series A heading into Series B territory. I've had people approach me for a couple of offers, but nothing that was really exciting enough to sell off. I also tend to think, it's hard to find really, really great companies. And so when you find one, there's, it's much easier to go from 100x to 200x in an investment than it is to go find another 100x investment. And so if I'm out there and I'm already in the thing and I believe in the founders and I'm try to let my money ride if I can.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But everyone, just so you know, like when companies break out, there's secondary opportunities no matter where you're at in the world. The question is like, are they breaking out, and then do you want to ride it you know, because like Ali said, that was super astute. Going from 100 to 200x is much easier than going from 0 to 100x. Yeah. There's a question here, you know, so, you know, some of you kind of alluded to this, right? Fundraising is never the easiest. It tends to be a little bit more challenging sometimes in LATAM for a lot of reasons. And on a kind of like an ecosystem level, how resilient are you seeing like the VC ecosystem being in LATAM, especially as kind of fundraising cycles go up and down? You know, I'd love to get your views on this because obviously that affects like follow-on funding and all this other stuff. I know, Marcus, maybe start with you.
Yeah, you know, I would say it's very resilient and it's very much growing. You know, we are part of the Chilean Venture Capital Association, which has been growing tremendously with new members, including family offices, etc. And many of the funds which started earlier than us, but still in the, you know, between 14 and 19, or let's say 2015, 18, they all were able to raise their second fund or even their third fund. So I would say it's very resilient. It's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy. Some governments are also putting private-public, let's say, policies in place, stimulating it. Uruguay just came out with a very attractive matching fund initiative, etc. So I would say it's very resilient and it has shown continuous growth. Of course, we all were affected by 22, 23 in a way, but I would say it's very resilient and the venture capital organizations across the different countries are meeting every year. They have different initiatives where they invite each other to really build that ecosystem. So I would say very resilient and you know, which is also a little bit of cultural. You know, people are used to problems, so they know how to put them away and survive them. But I would say it's very resilient from that perspective.
What do you think, Ali?
Yeah, I think it's actually surprising, right? Because even though it's supposed to be VC winter, I see a ton of people raising funds in Latin America and a lot of first-time managers. You know, much more so than I see almost anywhere else in the world. And when you look at back, you know, 2014, there were maybe 10, 15 funds in Latin America, and now there's probably several hundred, at least, you know, it seems like it. I don't have exact numbers, but there's a lot of funds, even in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, you know, places that, you know, didn't necessarily have a large VC community. It's not just in Brazil and in Argentina anymore or Chile anymore. I feel like it's kind of spread across the whole continent at this point.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Alex, you've been part of one of the most resilient ecosystems. Mexico obviously is the largest venture market in LATAM, but I'd love to get your views on this and how you're seeing it progress.
Yes, I think we see the people that are already investing in venture are investing more in venture. We still need more LPs, especially on the institutional side.
Agreed.
But I think the winter hasn't been as hard as in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's a kind of a follow-up sort of related question from Isaac here in the chat, you know, which is regards to differentiation and competition and things like this. I mean, his question is more like, how do you differentiate against, I would say, the US-based firms that are coming into LATAM, like Andreessen Horowitz has been pretty famous about kind of trying to expand down on LATAM. I'm not really sure that that's really a big problem for you all, to be fair, but like, you know, Ali, you did mention there's several hundred VC firms right now in Latin America. How do you think about this? How do you think about differentiation and things like that as you scale your VC firm?
I think it's really about establishing the relationship with the founders. I don't find myself really competing, I think, with most people because I'm talking to founders so early and trying to be helpful that when it comes time for them to raise, I end up usually being, you know, their first call to be their first check. And, you know, I think if we were seeing a ton of US VCs coming in, and I think most of us would be pretty happy, right? Like we kind of want more money coming into the ecosystem. I would gladly co-invest with Andreessen or Sequoia if they want to come into any of the companies I've invested in, or if they want to, invest alongside. I think in 2020 or 2021, we were probably seeing some of these things where, like, I would be talking to a founder, and then the next week they'd be like, "Oh, I can't do that valuation anymore because I got a term sheet from, some big US player." But I'm not really having that happen recently, and especially because I'm just investing earlier and earlier.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think we still need more capital. I'm not too worried about US funds investing in Latin America. I think that's positive, but it's true that we have a lot more funds in Latin America, and it's always difficult to differentiate, especially on the LP side. I speak with family offices that really like I really love your investments, I really love everything, but I've already invested in 2 or 3 other funds, and my bucket is full of venture capital, so I don't want to invest in a new fund. uh, on that side, it's always a little bit challenging. But if you invest in great companies and have great returns, that's like how you're gonna raise your next fund.
How about you, Marcus? What are your views on competition?
Yeah, of course, competition is there, for and your thesis has really have to be very, very clearly differentiated from others. And Me Too will not attract any investor. I think that is super important. I have to say, in our field, as we are specialized, that's a disadvantage of being specialized. That people say, I prefer to invest into a let's say fintech fund. I understand better, or an AI-driven fund, which is they feel they know more about it. In reality, they don't, but it happens a lot. So I think really it comes down to the thesis, to resilience, and also really putting a little bit the cost behind. That means scratching a little bit on the ego side of people, showing them that what you do is really impactful. It's not just the question about, do I put my money in here or there, but do I put my money where I can have a direct impact on the ecosystem, on the world, etc. So this is a little bit my strategy, even though I have to say that we also are targeting some US LPs, because biotech as such is a lot better known in the US, but there the competition is even harder. So it's not that easy. But I think really the differentiations of the thesis, the impact, and then resilience. That's for me the recipe to play.
I'm super curious. We have a lot of emerging managers, obviously, in the ecosystem. I actually recognize some names that are on the attendee list right now. What advice would you have for new fund managers starting a VC fund, particularly focused on Latin America, like today? Alex, I mean, maybe we can start with you, since you're kind of like the farthest along. You've been at this for a little while. Kind of, what's your sort of advice here to new fund managers starting VC firms in the region?
Yes, it depends a lot on what you want to build. It's really difficult to get capital, and you have to really polish your thesis and really have something differentiated. Uh, and also, uh, especially in the first fund, most of the money is going to come from people that already know you. The best way is to really start building track record, maybe via angel investment, via syndicates, or any other thing. But you really have to build a track record before raising, uh, and and keep in mind that most of your LPs are gonna be people that already know you and trust you. So make a list of possible investors, and just take into consideration, yeah, that probably you will need to talk with a lot of LPs, and it's really a lot of effort to build a fund. Uh, and it's really difficult, and in the long term it can be really good, but those first couple of years are going to be really difficult, and you just got to be really sure that this what you want to be, what you want to do for the next 10 or 15 years of your life.
Yeah, you did talk to a lot of LPs, Alex, that's for sure. Marcus, what advice do you have for, new or emerging managers starting funds in the region right now?
I think Alex already mentioned a very fine-tuned thesis. I think what is really important that beside your track record, you also involve some of your closest potential LPs very early on before you even start raising, sitting down with them, getting their feedback, getting their support, because you will need traction pretty quickly with those first, and those also need to be convinced that what you are presenting there has potential, so there can be your multipliers. And I think that is a big learning for me, which I would do more intensely, really getting people earlier earlier engaged, earlier involved in the process of even establishing and testing the thesis. I think that's for me very important.
How about you, Ali?
You know, I think VC Lab actually helped a lot, right? I think everybody comes in thinking they should be able to raise a $50 million fund and be able to do, have offices all over the continent and blah, blah, blah. I made a joke yesterday that I think I'm the world's most experienced unpaid intern. It's a long slog, right? Like you are probably not gonna make much money in the beginning. And it's gonna take you several years till you actually have enough there to actually raise a fund and to get LPs and have it like and have a track record. And so make sure you kind of understand what you're signing up for. And it's not going to be a $50 million fund. It's hard to even get a $5 million fund in LATAM, right? And most of the funds I'm seeing that are launching are, kind of around like less than 5 million for the most part. So, if you have 5 team members or stuff like that, and you're trying to live off the management fee of a $5 million fund, it's pretty tough. So make sure you kind of understand what you're signing up for and why you're signing up for it. And if it is really for you, great, welcome to this crazy journey of being a fund manager. But I'm not advertising for it. It's just if you want to do it, I'm more than happy to help. But I feel like if you ask most fund managers, they could go back. I don't know if they would all do it, right? Like even if they love it, it's a really challenging journey. And there's a lot, like if you're doing it for the money, there's a lot of better ways to make money. There's a lot better ways to get prestige. Like it's not that glamorous thing that I think a lot of people look at it from the outside.
Yeah, you definitely need a strong North Star to shoot for if you're going to sort of endure through the ups and downs of kind of getting going. The benefit, on the other hand, is that the impact that all of you are having on the ecosystem and really just the future itself is awe-inspiring. So everybody just think about it. Each manager just in their first fund is going to invest in roughly 20, 25 companies. In the case of Ali, you're going to do more, maybe Marcus a little bit less, that kind of thing. But generally, right? And they're going to raise multiple funds over time. So just the folks on this room alone are probably going to be responsible for backing hundreds and hundreds of startups, right? So the benefit for the future of humanity is pretty profound here. And of course, you can do really well financially as you get going. So kudos to you all, man. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for being such catalysts for this ecosystem that's like growing right now. That's one of the most interesting and hottest ecosystems we've seen. And thank you for doing what you do, everybody. Really appreciate it. And it's been an honor to work with you all. Everybody here that's on the call, if you're considering applying to the VC Lab, admissions are open right now. And the folks here are generally pretty available and pretty open for advice on social media and things like that. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time. This was epic.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.